At the end of May 1941, some of the world's most powerful warships dueled in the middle of the Atlantic, all revolving around the flagship of the German Kriegsmarine, Bismarck.
The most famous wreck in the Atlantic is no longer a silent grave because something inside has woken up. A recent expedition found a sealed compartment that is actually warmer than the water around it. This heat anomaly is coming from a room that was never on the official blueprints of the ship.
Seeing the human debris that sits around the site, the boots, the gas masks, all of this brings into context that this was not just a ship.
Even more disturbing is the fact that 32 men who were on the ship vanished from the records entirely. Now, a rhythmic SOS is coming from that exact spot. We are looking at a machine or a mystery that has been waiting for 80 years. Heat signature from the abyss. The Atlantic Ocean is a place where things usually go to be forgotten forever. Once you drop below the surface, the sun starts to fade until you reach a world of total blackness. This is the home of the Bismarck, a massive German battleship that was once the terror of the seas. It sits about 3 miles down, which is roughly 16,400 feet of water pressing down from every side. To understand how deep that is, you could stack the tallest mountains in Europe on top of each other and you still would not reach the bottom. At this depth, the pressure is over 6,000 pounds for every square inch. It is enough to crush a normal submarine like a piece of paper in less than a second. For a long time, we only saw the wreck through grainy photos or old videos, but 2024 changed everything. This was the year a team sent down the Prometheus 10, a special drone built to handle the heavy weight of the deep ocean. This machine is a marvel of engineering made to go where people simply cannot survive. It has special cameras and heat sensors that can see things the human eye would miss in the dark. The team expected to see rust and broken guns, but they did not expect to rewrite the history books. As the drone reached the bottom, the water should have been freezing cold, just a flat line of ice-cold death. That is how the deep ocean works, because everything down there has been frozen in time for almost a century. But then the thermal alarm on the ship above started to flash red. At first, the crew thought the drone was broken. They checked the wires and restarted the screens, thinking it was just a computer error. But the numbers did not change. As the drone moved over the side of the hull, the sensors picked up a heat spike. It was small at first, just a tiny bit warmer than the water around it. But in the deep sea, any heat at all is a huge deal. Metal that has been sitting in freezing water for over 80 years does not get warm on its own. It is physically impossible for a dead ship to make heat. The drone moved in closer, its small thrusters pushing away clouds of dirt from the sea floor. The camera zoomed in on a part of the hull that everyone had ignored before. It was a thick armored wall about 12 inches deep, part of the ship's most protected area. The heat was coming from right behind that steel. This news shocked everyone in the control room. Usually, a ship cools down to match the ocean just a few hours after it sinks. For the Bismarck to still have heat means there is an active source of energy inside. Some people thought it might be a chemical reaction, like a slow fire of rust burning without air. But the data showed the heat was too steady and stayed in one exact spot. It was coming from a reinforced room that had stayed sealed since the day the ship went down. People started guessing what could be in there. Maybe it was the electrical center of the ship, but the batteries from the 1940s would have died and rotted away decades ago. There is no battery from that time that could stay working for 80 years, let alone keep a room warm. Then the real mystery started to take shape. Was there secret equipment inside that was never put in the official logs? We know that near the end of the war, technology was moving very fast. There were rumors of experimental power units and special sensors that were years ahead of their time. But even a prototype needs power to run. The drone operator changed the view on the screen to see the heat more clearly. The heat was not just a random blob, it had a shape, like a row of machines running on standby mode. The idea seemed impossible, but there it was on the screen. A part of the Bismarck was acting like it was still alive. If something is making heat, it means something is using fuel or power. The team decided they had to get even closer to find out the truth. But here's the catch, the heat was only the first part of a much bigger problem. Synthetic secrets in the deep. The drone hovered just inches away from the bent metal plates of the ship. The bright lights of the Prometheus 10 cut through the dark, showing the scars on the side of the battleship. But the scientists were not looking at the rust anymore. They were staring at something that should not be 3 miles underwater. Around the edges of the sealed room, a strange liquid was leaking out from tiny cracks in the armor. It was a thin, oily film that looked clear and moved like jelly in the water. In the deep ocean, you usually see things like rusticles, which are long bits of rust made by bacteria that eat iron. You see mud and tiny sea creatures, but you never see clear slime that looks like a modern lubricant. The lead scientist told the drone to take a sample of the stuff. This was a very hard job because one wrong move could break the drone or cause the ship to collapse. Slowly, the robot arm moved forward. A small suction tool pressed against the hull to grab the liquid. When the sample was brought back to the surface hours later, the testing began right away. The team thought it might be old fuel or some strange sea bacteria. Fuel from old ships usually turns into thick black gunk, but this was not black and it was not gunk. Under a microscope, the substance was perfectly clean. It did not have the tiny cells of a living thing. It was not a fungus, and it was not from an underwater volcano. It was synthetic, meaning it was man-made. The chemicals inside showed it was a polymer filled with things like lithium. This result confused the whole lab. Silicone and lithium materials of this quality were not used back in 1941. While people were studying these things back then, they were not advanced enough to make this. This material looked like a modern gel used to protect high-tech electronics or nuclear cooling systems. It even reacted to heat and pressure. When they put a drop of it in a special tank to copy the deep-sea pressure, it did not break. It actually got thicker and stronger. One engineer called it a smart fluid. But how could a ship built in the late 1930s have technology that belongs in a modern space rocket? This started a whole new wave of theories. Was this chamber a storage spot for top-secret materials? We know the German Navy was desperate for any advantage they could find. They were testing things like synthetic rubber and new types of rockets. Maybe this gel was part of a system to stop vibrations. If the ship fired its huge 15-inch guns, the shaking would break delicate glass parts in the radios. You would need a way to soak up that shock. This gel could have been the fluid for a special room that stayed safe even while the ship was being hit by shells. But there is a much scarier theory. Some historians have talked about a secret project called Naval Horn. This was a plan to make sealed rooms that could survive if a ship sank. The goal was to keep codes, machines, and maybe even people safe until someone could come get them. The fact that they found lithium is a huge clue. Lithium is used in batteries to store a lot of energy. Finding it leaking from a warm room suggests that whatever is inside is using a high-power battery that we didn't know existed back then. It suggests a power source that has lasted far longer than anyone thought possible. Some people even started talking about preserving living things in a state of sleep, though that sounds like a movie. But the heat is real. A chemical breakdown of this much gel would make heat. So now we have a locked room that is warm and leaking a high-tech seal. It is sitting in a ship that was supposed to be dead technology. The researchers were already nervous when the ocean decided to give them another surprise. It is not that simple though, because the ship was doing more than just leaking. Rhythmic pings from a sunken fortress. Sound moves very well underwater, almost like it is traveling through a wire. Whales can talk to each other from hundreds of miles away, and submarines can hear a propeller from very far off. But the deep ocean is usually full of natural noise. You hear the earth shifting and the wreck groaning as it settles into the mud. It is usually just a lot of random sounds. But what the drone heard next was not random at all. The acoustic sensors on the Prometheus 10 were listening for signs that the ship might fall apart. Suddenly, the sound monitor showed a huge spike. A sharp, steady ping cut through the noise of the ocean. It was bouncing off the inside of that warm chamber and coming out into the water. At first, the team thought it was just an echo from the drone's own motors. They turned off the thrusters and let the drone float in the silence. The sound did not stop. It was 3 short hits, then 3 long ones, and then 3 short ones again. Then there was silence for exactly 62 seconds before it started over. The control room was completely quiet. Everyone there knew exactly what that pattern meant. It is the universal signal for help that almost everyone knows. It was SOS. But battleships from 1941 do not send Morse code. The power systems on the Bismarck were blown up by the British Navy before it even sank. Even if a generator had somehow survived the trip to the bottom, it would have run out of gas a long time ago. And even if there were batteries, they should have been dead for decades. So how was a perfect rhythmic signal coming from inside the wreck? The person looking at the sound waves noted how perfect it was. It was not a person hitting the wall with a hammer. That would sound messy and uneven. This was mechanical and perfectly timed to the millisecond. This meant it was an automated system. An old historian on the ship remembered something from a secret manual. He found a file about an emergency distress system. The system used simple gears and a heavy-duty power part. If a ship was lost, this machine would turn on and send out a low sound to help people find the wreck. But those machines were only supposed to work for a couple of days, not 80 years. This is where the Signal 9 theory comes from. The pings were 62 seconds apart. In the old German naval codes, certain times meant different things. 62 seconds was a special code that meant the ship is sealed and the cargo is safe. This idea is terrifying. Was there a machine inside that room that had been waiting in the dark for 80 years? Maybe the lights from the drone or the sound of the sonar woke it up. Some machines are made to turn on only when they hear a certain sound. They sit there using zero power until a specific noise hits them. Then a chemical reaction starts the battery for one last message. Had the researchers accidentally turned on a key they didn't know about? The SOS happened 4 times over 6 minutes and then it stopped. The silence after that felt very heavy. It was like the ship had spoken one last time and went back to sleep. So here is the deal. If that system is still active after all this time, should we even try to open it? What if the secret inside is something that was never meant to return to the world above? Let us know what you think in the comments. Would you open the door or leave it at the bottom of the ocean? If you like this mystery, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories from the deep. Thanks for watching.